So, about a week ago, I traveled into Brooklyn to visit a single block. The fastest subway route there was about an hour long, but the overall journey was quite a bit longer, since I still had to traverse a mile and a half on foot after getting off the train. I was in the Bed-Stuy neighborhood, Bedford and Stuyvesant, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, famous for its historic brownstones and black populace. Because I had to walk so far from the train to the block I was headed towards, I got a real taste of the area. The Herbert von King Park was a major landmark I used to tell where I was at all times, its baseball fields and dogs giving me an inner warmth despite how frigid the weather was that day. Part of me thinks that the cold was fitting, though, given the film whose setting inspired my journey. Eventually, I arrived at Do the Right Thing way. Now, a bit of background. Do the Right Thing is a 1989 film directed by Spike Lee, a Spike Lee joint, and his third film overall. The film is set on the exact block I visited, albeit on the hottest day of the summer, and concerns the racial tensions between the majority black neighborhood of Bed-Stuy and the Italian-American Sal's famous pizzeria. This is, of course, told from the perspective of Spike Lee's character, Mookie, who is both a black man living in the neighborhood as well as an employee of Sal's. As tensions escalate, a fight breaks out in the pizzeria. After police are called to break up the fight, they kill one of the men involved, Radio Raheem. The community is shocked, and after Mookie throws a trash can through the window of Sal's, the film ends with the neighborhood trashing and eventually lighting the pizzeria on fire. While Mookie and Sal reach a sort of mutual understanding at the end, there's a moral ambiguity over all the prior events. Now, to exclusively focus on any one aspect of the film does the rest of the film a disservice. As much can be said about the message of racial violence and police brutality. However, I'd like to experiment. We are going to talk about those things, but I'd like to start elsewhere. I'd like to start with the neighborhood itself. Now, it can't be overstated how deeply soaked in Brooklyn this film is. To those familiar with Spike Lee's other work, this wouldn't be surprising, but the neighborhood is present in quite literally every single exterior shot of the film. Paula J. Massoud, in an interview with Lee, describes his film as microcosmic studies of the city's neighborhoods, providing intimate access to the people and places. You're either indoors in a building in the neighborhood, or you're in the street, nothing else. I can't even recall a shot of the sky in isolation. The brownstones are an omnipresent backdrop to every single line of dialogue and every single piece of action in this film. The neighborhood becomes its own character in a way. Other characters' interactions with the neighborhood become defining traits of themselves. How Mother Sister sits in her window, how Mr. Senor Love Daddy DJs through his window, how Radio Raheem patrols the sidewalk with his boombox. These characters are partially framed through how they treat and view the streets. It being on the street is important as well. Having the film set on such a hot day means that most of the characters are sitting out on their porch trying to cool off. The street is lively. Crowds are drawn at important scenes, from the loosened fire hydrant to the mayor's saving of a young boy, and all of this aids the sense of community. Mookie, whose job is to deliver pizzas, seemingly runs every job on foot, since he's never traveling much further than a block. It's an intimate affair, which drives a lot of the drama in the film. Now, I'd like to touch down on one very important scene. Not particularly important to the narrative of the film, I don't even think it's included in the Wikipedia synopsis, but it's demonstrative of where I'm taking this. To set up what happens, Buggin' Out, portrayed by Giancarlo Esposito, has just ended a conversation with Mookie and one of Sal's sons, Vito. At this moment, a white man on a bike rides past Buggin' Out, running over and dirtying his fresh Air Jordans. Buggin' Out chases him down over this coalescing crowd and asks, specifically, "Who told you to be in my neighborhood?" And, "Why do you want to live in a black neighborhood anyway? Motherfuck gentrification." Now, the punchline that ends the scene is the white guy revealing he was born in Brooklyn, but I want to focus on motherfuck gentrification. After all, why is he living in this neighborhood? He could live anywhere, and yet he chose Bed-Stuy. Was it cheaper? The film leaves it up to audience interpretation, but regardless of where he's born, he's still viewed as an unwelcome intruder, and he's not the only one. Why is Sal's Pizzeria in this neighborhood? He claims directly that there are too many pizzerias in Little Italy, and so his business is in Bed-Stuy, who he's been happily serving for 25 years. Prior to the events of the film, it appears to be a rather harmonious partnership, but look at the architecture, look at the brownstones, and look at Sal's. Compare these narrow, tall buildings to his short, round restaurant. It's still brick, but it's out of place. Notably, Sal's Pizzeria was entirely constructed for the film, placed in a previously vacant lot and demolished after shooting, of course, after being burned to the ground. And so this is a clearly intentional choice. Visually implies that Sal, too, is an intruder. Believe it or not, about 20 years after Do the Right Thing, Mookie returned in another Spike Lee film, Red Hook Summer, in which he still works at the reopened Sal's Pizzeria in the Red Hook neighborhood. In an interview hosted by John Turturro, who played Pino in the film, Lee jokes that Sal moved to Red Hook because he lacked the vision to see the eventual gentrification of Bed-Stuy, confirming that Sal's Pizzeria was a gentrifier in and of itself. The film has a different attitude towards another character, Sonny. He's a Korean immigrant who runs a bodega on the street, which characters remark that he managed to start quite soon after immigrating. During the riot at Sal's Pizzeria, the crowd turns towards Sonny's bodega since he's not like them either, but he convinces them to leave him alone. "I'm not white," he yells, and that's true. Is he an intruder? No one seems to think particularly highly of him. A whole lot of the characters are openly racist to Sonny and his wife, and yet he's not a target. He's an immigrant. He's still quite disadvantaged, and while some characters might be suspicious of how he opened the bodega, it's clear that he's still part of the community to some extent. Maybe they'll be questioning him more in the future, but as of right now, his position is secure. So what is gentrification? We have to recognize it as not just people of a certain race in an area largely inhabited by people of another race, which is also how the film understands it. At no point is Sonny a gentrifier. The film clearly isn't in favor of segregation or anything like that. It's the act of wealthier people, people of a higher advantage, moving into a poorer area due to its cheaper property, in effect raising the real estate value while simultaneously displacing the poor people who lived there. They're driven out through price. Syed Ali, in his piece Unplugged, I Gentrify Bed-Stuy, describes how industrial and poor districts have become attractive for their cheap rents for artists, queers, and college student pioneers, with the crux of these communities being formerly black. With this in mind, I'd like to touch down on my own visit to Bed-Stuy and Do the Right Thing way. Discovering original filming locations was easy. I found Mr. Senor Love Daddy's window near instantly. I found the lot that Sal's Pizzeria used to be in, and the famous Bed-Stuy Do or Die mural. There were a few new murals too, one to Do the Right Thing and another for Lee's film Mo Better Blues. Clearly, the block has a great admiration for Lee's work, what with it having been renamed Do the Right Thing Way in honor of the film. But every brownstone has clearly been renovated. The next block over features giant, modern office buildings whose minimalist ugliness sticks out like a sore thumb. White men bike past me as I take my photos, parking in front of Tina's townhouse, which they bought for $2 million. I see superficial signs of friendliness, a little free library placed next to a community garden, but I also see neighborhood watch signs, which I was too nervous to take pictures of. I avoided taking photos of anyone's homes, only capturing Love Daddy's window as the blinds were shut tight, but even photographing the public murals got me odd stares from a woman pushing her pug in a stroller. For a community that places great importance on Do the Right Thing, what about the people that Do the Right Thing is about? Where is the black community that once lived here? The characters in the film are destined to either having to trudge through legal nonsense in order to continue paying the same rent, or they'll be priced out and forced to live elsewhere. The film has become more important than the people it's about. Shallow tributes to Lee and Do the Right Thing are more commonplace than the black people who star in it. Bed-Stuy is unimaginably important to Do the Right Thing. The black community is the focus of the film, and without them, the film wouldn't exist. And yet, as that community is systematically dismantled and displaced, the film lives on. It's in the Library of Congress. The street has been named after it, and yet it's no longer the same street at all. Some of the same buildings are still standing, but everything else is burned to the ground. The film has become a time capsule of a city that's long gone, its skeletons occupied by white programmers and photographers. If that's a too depressing note to end the song, I'll leave you with this. While the only remains of what once was are kept inside the film, we do still have the film. If it's a time capsule, it's a beautiful time capsule. It's a masterpiece of cinema that punches you in the gut with its emotional reality. Many of its themes are still relevant today. The aftermath of the death of Radio Raheem has been mirrored in the news quite recently, and the political ambiguity of the ending is still interesting. I'd argue that Mookie did the right thing. No property is worth more than human life, and it's clear through the ending that Mookie doesn't regret his actions. It seems to be the message the film is intended to convey. Regardless, it's interesting. were better off because of Lee's film. Now, that is my time. Here are my sources. I used only a couple, but they were very insightful. That is all. Thank you very much. Thank you for listening to me rambling. It was a good trip, too. Alright, bye.